Hello, my name is Zara Hoffman. I'm a self-published author of young adult paranormal romance and soon to be new adult sci-fi romance. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about another musical that I really love. In 1964, Fiddler on the Roof opened on Broadway. Before it closed, it was the first musical in Broadway history to pass 3,000 performances, and it won 9 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. Based on the stories by Sholem Aleichem with music by Sheldon Harnick and lyrics by Jerry Bach, this musical has remained popular for many, many years since its opening and has been performed every single day somewhere. There have been 14 official revivals, which includes U.S. tours and productions abroad, but do not include the many school productions that have been mounted across the globe every year. And it does include the 2019 all Yiddish production, which I will talk a lot more about later in this video. If you don't know what the story is about, Fiddler on the Roof is based on the Sholem Aleichem story Tevye the Dairyman and Tevye and his daughters. It is about how the 3 eldest of his 5 daughters fall in love and each challenge his sense of tradition in the process. You can kind of think of it as a Jewish Pride and Prejudice, but there's a lot more to it than Jane Austen's novel, which is not to knock it because I absolutely love that story. But it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison, but it's pretty close in some ways. The musical is set in Anatevka, which is a settlement of Imperial Russia in 1905, and there's a lot of political tensions threaded throughout the story, including a rather upsetting pogrom scene, which is very upsetting for certain older audiences who may or may not have lived through similar experiences. Despite the cheery songs of Tradition and L'Chaim, which means to life and was performed at Lin-Manuel Miranda's wedding, and the song If I Were a Rich Man, which was then turned into If I Were a Rich Girl by the British duo Lucy Liu and Mitchie One, which was then redone by Gwen Stefani. The story is a lot deeper and means a lot more the older you get. Similar to my first experience with The Sound of Music, I didn't understand the political context of the story when I was younger and was bored by most of the story because of that and could only appreciate some of the music. But when I got older, I loved the story as much as I love the music, which means that I love the musical as a whole a lot more now. I have personally seen the show 4 times, spanning 2 different productions but 3 different casts, and I'm also going to mention a few other productions because my mom saw it with her mother after her parents saw the original production starring Zara Mostel. There's a whole history regarding Zara Mostel and the director Jerome Robbins, who choreographed the musical but also did West Side Story, which is very famous, and that story is partially told in the documentary A Miracle of Miracles, which is available on Amazon Prime. I will leave a link to that down below. It's a very good documentary, and if you're interested in the history of this musical more, you should click on it and watch it. Like I mentioned before, my grandparents saw the musical with Zara Mostel, and they loved it so much that my grandma brought my mom to it. And then the first time I saw the musical was a revival in 2004 with Alfred Molina playing Tevye, and in the song If I Were a Rich Man, the character does a lot of animal noises when he's mimicking how many animals he would have if he were rich. And Zara Mostel is famous for those animal sounds on the soundtrack, and I grew up listening to that. So when I heard Alfred Molina do his animal sounds, I apparently did this, and I was very young and did not understand that the actor could probably see me doing that because my mom and I had gotten very good tickets and were sitting in the orchestra. Wasn't my best theater etiquette moment, but I've gotten better since, I promise you. And then I saw the same production a few years later with Harvey Fierstein and Rosie O'Donnell as Tevye and Tevye's wife Golda. And let me just say, they're, regardless of what you think about politics of Rosie O'Donnell, she can be a good actress, and Harvey Fierstein is a great actor. These roles were not for them. The next time I saw the show was the 2015 Tony Award nominated revival, and that actually means that I've seen the show 5 times instead of the 4 that I mentioned earlier. I totally forgot about this one, which is not because it was a bad production. It just kind of pales in comparison to the Yiddish one, which I want to talk about next. But Danny Burstein was nominated for a Tony Award, and I think he was the best Tevye that I'd seen up until that point. He was the first actor to make me feel that Tevye loved his daughters, despite being very patriarchal and kind of angry and domineering at times. One thing that my mom absolutely did not like about the production was that they did away with Jerome Robbins' fantastic and iconic choreography. And I agree with her. They did use a Israeli choreographer who drew from the original choreography, but it wasn't the same. I don't think I'm as upset about it as she was, but it was upsetting. And then what really got me was and my mom agrees with me on this one, is that the woman who played Golda was just way too harsh. There's a song called Do You Love Me between Tevye and his wife, and they kind of talk about, the question in the song. And it ends very sweetly, the lyrics and the music, but the way that they performed it, I just didn't get that feeling like I had in other ones. And then what annoyed me, but I don't think my mom cared as much about, was that in the opening of the show, they had decided to put everyone in down coats, modern down coats. And then at the end, during a bittersweet goodbye in which all of the residents of Anatevka are forced to leave their home, they then put on the modern clothes again as they're leaving, and it just completely breaks you out of the 1905 Imperial Russia settlement setting. So I wasn't a fan of that at all. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the Yiddish production, which has been my favorite of all of them, and I've mentioned it multiple times throughout this video so far. So here's the deal. The Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof was directed by Joel Grey, who was the original wizard in Wicked, which plays at the Gershwin Theater. And my mom's first experience with Fiddler on the Roof, the production that she saw, was Herschel Bernardi, who was the second Tevye on Broadway after Zara Mostel, and the show was playing at the Gershwin Theater back then. Fun fact, when I saw it for the first time, it was playing at the Minskoff Theater, which is actually where The Lion King now plays, and I've made a video about Wicked and The Lion King already on this channel, so if you'd like to see those, please click the link in the card or the description down below. And I really love this production because it just places the story in the language that they would have been speaking at the time in the place where the story is set. It also brings me closer to my grandma, because even though she passed away and unfortunately was not able to see this production because it came out 7 years after she died, I remember her speaking Yiddish every so often. It kind of feels like it should have been written in that language to begin with. It was translated into Yiddish many years ago, but this was the first fully mounted Yiddish production ever done. It stars Steven Skybell, who is a great actor, who looks very different with the beard as Tevye and without a beard, which is kind of funny. And he also has played the wizard in Wicked. He was also one of only 2 cast members at the start of the show to already be fluent in Yiddish, because he and his brother taught themselves after wanting to finally know what their grandparents had been saying all these years. You wouldn't know necessarily that he knows Yiddish better than the other people in the cast, but it really shows that they did a lot of work to get the Yiddish intonations correct and the pronunciation and everything, and it just kind of adds to the whole story. I mentioned how Danny Burstein's Tevye was the first one that I experienced to really care for his daughters, but Steven Skybell's does that even more so, and he's also the only Tevye that I can see why he loves his wife. I think in part that is also due to the amazing acting job done by the actress who plays Golda in this production. But I don't know, this was the first time I ever felt like the family unit worked. It wasn't just a dictatorship run by Tevye, and he was actually a loving father who wanted the best for his girls and loved his wife, even though they were initially in arranged marriage, and all these different things that, you would know based on the lyrics from the other productions, but I never emotionally got because of the performances in the other shows. Even though the show is no longer open, it closed before COVID, but luckily after my mom and I were able to take my uncle and his wife and his daughters and our other cousin who lives in the city and his wife, we all went as a family, and it was a lot of fun to see the show again. The show had English super titles and also Russian up on panels on both sides of the stage while the action was happening in the center, and it was a really cool experience, and I just really loved it. And if you are interested in, maybe seeing what the Yiddish was, the website for the Yiddish production actually has a PDF of the English lyrics, the Yiddish lyrics, and the English lyrics if you translate them directly from the Yiddish. It doesn't exactly line up because they have to change certain things for musical beats or meaning and different things like that, but it's a really cool thing to see. I will leave a link to the PDF down below. And that's really all I have to say about this awesome musical. There is a very famous movie version starring the original West End Tevye, and he's very good in it, but my mom has never really loved it as much as seeing it on stage. I personally haven't seen the movie in recent years, so I can't speak on it as much because I don't remember my experience watching it as a child, but the story is great, and because we're all still, not going to theater, you might want to watch that movie and see if you can find a recording of the Tony Award performances done by the different productions. Listen to the music. It's beautiful, it's moving, and what more do you want from a musical?